It happened. Putin has become a pariah. The Kremlin's master is rapidly losing his last friends. Russia is in complete isolation. The chronology is remarkable. Syria, Venezuela, and now the historic defeat of Iran. The consequences are devastating for Russia, billions down the drain. Russian tankers and oil have been seized. And there's more. Moscow has lost its Shaheds and ballistic missiles. Now the dictator of the Federation is begging the Arabs to stop the bombings. Meanwhile, Ukraine's allies are holding strong. Now Kyiv is a shield for the entire world. Our specialists are heading to the Middle East. How Putin lost his comrades and a ton of resources in just a few years. And what Zelensky agreed upon with the leader of the Emirates. All the details right now. Don't miss it. My respects, I am Andrei Silakov, and this is the channel Ukraine Today. Let's discuss the Kremlin's global blunder. The master of the Kremlin is rapidly losing his last bloody allies. The Kremlin's geopolitical strategy has suffered a complete historical collapse. In just 1 year, the so-called axis of evil has crumbled, leaving an isolated Russia all alone, with its massive problems in the economy and on the front lines. Putin's puppets and sponsors of terrorism are falling one after another, and now the whole world sees Moscow. It's a sinking ship. Moscow's fattest military partner, Iran, is right now being reduced to zero by the tandem of Israel and America. The main sponsor of Putin's terror, dictator Khamenei, has been eliminated, and all of Tehran's defense infrastructure is in flames. Because of this, Russia has not only lost a reliable supplier of Shahed drones, of which 57,000 have already been produced, and ballistic missiles worth $3 billion. It has lost its only major defense alliance in the Middle East.
In addition to the Shaheds, which the Russians call Geran, Iranian ballistic missiles are systematically launched at our cities and villages. Tehran supplied these to Moscow for a total of $3 billion. Now, Iran's military-industrial potential is being destroyed, and obviously there will be fewer opportunities to continue supplying Russia.
And what did Moscow do when its allies started getting wiped out? It cowardly tucked its tail. Putin once again proved to China and North Korea, if you start getting bombed, Russia won't help you. The Kremlin simply ditched Tehran as soon as things got heated, completely wiping out its own credibility. But the master of the Federation suddenly remembered international law. Putin decided to put on the mask of the great peacemaker. And in a panic, he started frantically calling the leaders of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, and the Emirates. He offered his services to stabilize the Middle East. The Arabs understand perfectly well that Putin's guarantees are worthless, and his cheap circus act only provokes disgust among world leaders. In
each of these phone conversations, Putin emphasized Russia's readiness to contribute to stabilizing the situation around Iran and the Persian Gulf states, as well as the urgent need to resolve the conflict through diplomatic means. Putin noted that Russia has done much in the past to facilitate the peaceful resolution of situations concerning Iran's nuclear program and the search for mutually acceptable compromises. Putin is trying to find a balance between maintaining relations with partners, including Iran, and establishing contacts with other states of the Persian Gulf, as well as positioning itself as a mediator in response to the growing military escalation in the Middle East.
But the Iranian ashes are not all there is. Recently, right under the Kremlin's nose, American special forces brilliantly eliminated a Russian foothold in Latin America. Dictator Nicolás Maduro was captured in just 3 hours. The much-praised Russian air defense systems in Venezuela, the S-300 and Pantsir, didn't even make a peep, letting the US helicopter through. Moscow poured a staggering $8 billion into this regime, dreaming of creating an anti-American stronghold, but in the end, received a powerful slap in the face.
Venezuela was important for Rosneft as it provided opportunities to make business deals that would replenish the Russian economy. Now the West has a chance to put more effective pressure on the Kremlin. One way or another, the Kremlin's oil revenues have dropped by 25%. Difficulties in cooperating with Venezuela could also impact Russia's financial capabilities.
Russian tankers carrying Venezuelan oil were immediately seized. The Kremlin's oil revenues, which had already dropped by 25%, plummeted even further. And as Putin responded, he once again swallowed his pride, limiting himself to pitiful diplomatic size. Russia is so bogged down in Ukraine that it simply no longer has the strength or resources to enter into a direct confrontation with the United States. And of course, the grand fiasco in Syria. The dictator Bashar al-Assad, whom Putin had been showering with money and savings since 2015, disgracefully fled to Russia, running for his life. Syrian rebels are toppling monuments to dictators, drinking coffee in his palaces, and taking control of an entire country. Moscow leveled Aleppo to the ground and leased a base for 49 years. But as soon as the entire Russian army got stuck and began to wear down in the Ukrainian steppes, the Syrian project instantly collapsed.
These bases have become critically important hubs for transferring military mercenaries to Africa, where Russia uses anti-Western sentiment to strengthen its influence. But it is unclear what the new Syrian government will be willing to allow. Russian diplomats are fleeing Damascus en masse. And right now, Russia may not have the ability to handle the situation.
It is specifically Putin's diplomats who are fleeing Damascus in a state of animal panic. The much vaunted Russian naval and air bases in the Mediterranean Sea are now hanging by a thread and could be seized by the new authorities at any moment. Putin's brilliant multi-move strategy in the Middle East has ended in utter disgrace and retreat. And while Putin sits in complete isolation amid the ruins of his alliances, Ukraine is demonstrating diplomatic strength and strengthening its relationships with allies. President Volodymyr Zelensky made a brilliant move. He agreed to help Middle Eastern countries and send our best battle-hardened air defense operators. But in exchange for the Ukrainian steel shield, Arab leaders must force Putin to agree to a ceasefire on our terms.
I would suggest the following. The leaders of Middle Eastern countries have excellent relations with the Russians. They can ask the Russians to implement a one-month ceasefire. As soon as a ceasefire is reached, we will send our best operators, drone pilots, and interceptors to the Middle Eastern countries.
And Kiev's words instantly turn into real actions. President Zelensky has already held crucial talks with the leader of the United Arab Emirates, Mohammed bin Zayed. While Iranian fanatics are striking shopping centers and mosques with rockets, Ukraine and the Emirates have agreed to coordinate special teams to protect civilians. We are not only sharing our invaluable experience in destroying Shaheds, but also right now through the efforts of our Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Intelligence Services. We are helping to evacuate people from the blazing region. Ukraine is taking the initiative into its own hands. We are saving the world while Putin's Russia and its allies are destroying it.
We discussed the key aspects of the situation in the Middle East and the region during a meeting with the President of the UAE, Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. I express my condolences to him over the loss of lives caused by Iran's senseless attacks.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
One more comrade down. Orban is next. That moment has come. The West is sharpening its knives to permanently cut off Putin's oil artery for the Hungarian blackmailer. How exactly Washington and Brussels are depriving the Kremlin's main Trojan horse of his billions? See all the details in the report.
Orban has gone too far. Druzhba is finished, the oil pipeline of decades. The pipeline that pumped oil to Europe is now under threat. This
was the project of the century. Let me remind you, back in the 1970s, when these pipelines were being built from the USSR. In Europe, it was even called the deal of the century, the project of the century, building these pipelines. Now is the time to abandon this project of the century.
The European Union and the United States continue to push out Russian energy resources, planning to completely stop importing gas by January 2028, and the share of Russian oil has already dropped to 3%. The European Commission's strategic goal remains unchanged, to end all imports of raw materials from Russia by the end of 2027. On April 15th, the European Commission will present a legal proposal for a permanent ban on the import of Russian oil. This will happen 3 days after the parliamentary elections in Hungary, so that the oil ban does not become a major factor in the election campaign. The EU wants to enshrine in law a complete and gradual phase-out of Russian oil, which will remain in force even if a peace agreement in Ukraine leads to the lifting of European sanctions.
Russia is losing its pro-Russian forces. Back at the end of the Soviet Union and the beginning of Ukraine's independence, there was a very popular Italian TV series called Spoot. And there's a phrase in it. Our friends are only those whom we can kill. Well, Russia's friends are those whom Russia can buy. If Russia can no longer buy friends, if it has no resources, then Russia simply won't have any friends either. At the same time, Russia itself, which earns a lot from the European market, is losing its most profitable market. Because what remains for it is the Chinese market.
Hungary and Slovakia are among the last remaining importers of Russian oil in the European Union. Other member states have found new suppliers for themselves over the past 4 years. According to Reuters, deliveries of Russian oil via the southern branch of the Druzhba pipeline amounted to 9.7 million tons in 2025. Slovakia received almost 5 million and Hungary a little over 4.
Huge purchases of energy resources from Russia. Listen, in the first 10 months of 2025, the EU paid Russia 26 billion US dollars, as far as I remember, mainly for energy resources. So on the one hand, you say that Russia is a threat to you. On the other hand, you give it money by buying its resources. And you could buy these resources not from Russia, you could buy them elsewhere. Accordingly, you are essentially bringing to life Lenin's famous saying, which stated that they would hang the capitalists with the very rope that those same capitalists would sell them.
Hungary gets Russian oil 15 to 20% cheaper than it could get it from others, from other buyers. Experts say that the profits from reselling cheap Russian oil at market prices in Hungary are not used to lower prices for the population, but are instead accumulated in the interests of a narrow circle of elites connected to Viktor Orban's government.
One specific and troubling aspect of this systemic corruption is when they claim that you will personally ensure all Russian resources pass directly through you. And in return for this favor, you will receive these valuable resources at significantly lower prices than the market rate. That's the margin, which will end up in your pockets, and you will have a direct benefit that you use to stay in power and for your election campaigns. Therefore, these are not the interests of Hungary and Slovakia. These are the interests of Orban and his circle. These are the interests of Fico and his circle, who want to profit from Russian resources by reselling them to Europe.
The United States is also striking at Russian energy carriers. However, for Washington, the key issue is not oil, but gas. Hungary signed a contract with the United States for gas supplies as early as December of last year. If the southern branch of Druzhba is finally shut down and Hungary switches to American gas and nuclear fuel, it will not only be a blow to the Kremlin's revenues, but also the removal of the last levers of energy blackmail.
The strategy of the Soviet Union, which was inherited by Russia, is to make Europe dependent on itself. It's like this so-called gas addiction, just like with drug addicts. Everyone gets hooked on the drug from these rhythms, and it's the same with gas. The advantage of obtaining resources from Russia makes European politics, let's say, dependent on an interest in Russia. In other words, Russia creates dependence on itself through energy resources for these countries, and reforms are carried out in European countries that maintain dependence on Russian resources, and this is beneficial, first and foremost, for Russia.
Therefore, no matter how hard Putin tries to keep his allies, he will not succeed.
Breaking news. The Middle East is ablaze and the Kremlin is trembling. Right at this very moment, the latest explosive information about the total cleansing of the axis of evil in the Middle East. How is this historic meat grinder right now driving Moscow into a state of animalistic hysteria? Watch the report.
There will be no truce. On the contrary, the entire Middle East is entering the war. Even European countries are getting involved. Iran has officially refused to negotiate with the US, and Tehran is prepared for a long war. Moreover, they are attacking everyone indiscriminately. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and Iraq have already come under attack from Tehran. Even the British Akrotiri airbase in Cyprus was targeted. A drone flew there. The UK Ministry of Defence confirmed the strike. Cyprus President Nikos Christodoulidis stated that the base sustained only minor damage.
I want to make it clear, our country is in no way involved and does not intend to participate in any military operations.
Iran mostly directs its anger at Israel, often targeting ordinary residential neighborhoods. However, on Monday morning, a strike was also carried out against the military and political leadership. The IRGC claims to have attacked Netanyahu's office. Allegedly, the Israeli Air Force Command was also targeted. Israel, as well as American and European bases, are not Iran's only targets. Iranian attacks have also targeted oil infrastructure. Tehran has already struck a refinery in Saudi Arabia. There is also information about a drone attack on offshore oil platforms in the United Arab Emirates. Due to the strikes on the oil industry, as well as uncertainty surrounding the operation of the Strait of Hormuz, which is used by most tankers and is controlled by Iran, the price of black gold has soared to over $80 per barrel. Usually about 1/5 of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas passes through the Strait of Hormuz every day. Iran stated that the waterway remains open. However, it also confirmed attacks on 3 oil tankers on Sunday. Israel and the United States effectively control the skies over Iran and continue to methodically destroy its military and defense infrastructure. In response, Iran officially declared that it does not plan to develop missiles capable of reaching U.S. territory. But strikes on American bases abroad are called a just response. You
said that your missiles cannot reach the United States. You are not seeking to reach the US, but you also said that it would be necessary as part of self-defense. Just to be clear, can you guarantee that Iran is not building and will not build missiles capable of reaching the United States? I can confirm that, yes.
Sir, if this is a red line for you, why are attacks on American air bases abroad justified?
Because they attack us. And
the countries that have suffered from Iran's strikes clearly do not see any justice in this. With its actions, Tehran has only increased the number of its enemies. The UAE and Saudi Arabia are already joining the war against Iran. Both countries have strongly condemned Tehran's actions and warned of the consequences of further violations of the sovereignty of neighboring states. And even France is ready to enter the war.
France is ready in accordance with the agreements that bind it to its partners and the principle of collective self-defense provided for by international law to take part in their protection. As for
active measures, only Russia is not ready. There they once again stated that they are in constant contact with the Iranian leadership. Simply put, they're keeping their finger on the pulse, but they're not planning to do anything. China has also spoken out. In the Celestial Empire, all parties involved in the Iranian conflict have been called upon to cease military actions and prevent an escalation of the conflict.
The strikes by the US and Israel against Iran violated international law. And China is deeply concerned about the consequences for neighboring countries.
Analysts say the next 48 hours will be decisive. Either there will be a capitulation of the Iranian regime or further escalation. After the death of Ayatollah Khamenei, protests in the country intensified. There are also reports of tension between the Iranian Regular Army and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The risk of nuclear escalation is too high. In addition, Iran has announced that a nuclear facility in Natanz has been hit. The IAEA warns of the risk of radiation leakage.